Okay, so welcome everyone. It is a joy to see you. Some of you saw you yesterday, where we had such a great bird walk, and I'll talk a little bit about that in just a minute. I'd like to thank Cultural Affairs for setting up this bird series, and this has been a lot of fun. We're already trying to plan, a similar series on other topics for the spring, just in case if this works out with anyone's schedule, and if anyone finds this interesting. We'll be talking about the wonderful wildlife that you can see in our area, and obviously then would want to give a shout out to all of the great organizations which help to preserve the habitat where this wildlife could be seen. So the Orange County Audubon Society has a number of sanctuaries, 5 in our area, and a lot of the photography that you're going to be seeing here is from there. Come on, help manage that property, so I take a lot of pictures there. Yesterday, our great bird walk was at the Bashakil, just over the border in Sullivan County. And I'll be honest, I have led bird walks, especially in winter, where we see very few birds, and it they're not as much fun as the ones where you see birds. At the beginning of our walk yesterday, we were standing on the boat launch, and there were 5 bald eagles in view. So you could just stand there and say, "There's an immature, there's a pair. Oh, and over there, there's a pair." So, bird walks where you start with 5 eagles that you don't even have to move to see. That those are good bird walks. So we are surrounded by such great habitat, and hopefully one of the goals of this a talk is to introduce you to just the beauties that you can see around you. And also, just yesterday we had a great walk, as we have in previous walks at 6.5 Station, etc. And so if you enjoy getting out, then maybe joining one of these organizations, I'm sure they would benefit from your interest and your enthusiasm. You might meet like-hearted individuals who would enjoy hiking with you. I've known people who said, like, I'd love to get out, but I'd prefer to go with someone. And so by all means, there are membership things here. Someone in one of my classes earlier had said, like, oh, I wish I knew there was a walk. And so these organizations, they have websites which show, like, oh, here's a presentation coming up at this library, here's a hike coming up over here. So once again, you might want to periodically check these out to see if there's anything that appeals to you. Well,
Audubon Society.
okay, and so I'm just going to be playing lots and lots of videos from my YouTube channel, but I'll be zipping through. So if anyone says, oh, I'd like to see that a little bit more, my YouTube channel is at Dr. Jan 41, DRJAHN 41. You go there, YouTube. I got all these playlists, including all of these birds. So we've gone through each bird group, but as Candace, you pointed out, a good strategy would be to think about the seasons, right? Where you pointed out, like, oh, like this is the season for fox sparrows. There are so many kinds of sparrows that, especially as a beginner birder, you might say, oh, where would I even start? But then you're like, ooh, it's autumn. There's one that I haven't seen all summer. I might be expecting this. Or as winter begins, ooh, the white crowned sparrows, the tree sparrows, etc. So the goal of this week's presentation and next week's is to kind of get you in a zone that maybe that helps your bird watching, that you have this big bird book and there's so many species. You're not going to see all of them every season. And if you go out in a given season, that might help, like, ooh, this is kind of what I'm expecting to see in this season. So this week, I'd like to talk about the birds of autumn and of winter. Next week, spring and summer. And then the last week of the presentation, although we could maybe add another one if people were interested, it would be the environmental issues and climate change which face birds. So those of our 14-week series, those were the ones which we were looking at. So all of these are images from September right up the road. So the Audubon Sanctuary just outside Goshen, 15 minutes, if you hit a couple of stoplights from here. So very, very close. These are all things that you could see. And obviously autumn is exciting because now you're seeing a whole bunch of birds which are migrating. But I start off with an awkward question just to get it out of the way. Do birds migrate like the kinds that we'll be talking about? It is not always a yes or no answer. All right. So you'd like to say, yes, birds migrate, this species migrate. No, this one doesn't migrate. So I just want to sow this seed because it's going to pop up a lot. Uh, it's not clear cut because there's what's called partial migration. And that can mean a couple of things. So let me just kind of sow the seed and we can develop it throughout the presentation. Some of these birds, they have big ranges. At the north of the range, everybody migrates. So if you go to Canada's birds and ask, are like the ones that are breeding up there, they're definitely going to migrate. But some of these birds, their range, I did bring a couple of extra chairs, Dorothy, and I propped the door open. And so here, we're just at the bald eagle. So why don't we just say a word about the bald eagle? Is the bald eagle a migratory bird? Well, that's hard to answer. The ones who live up north are, because if they feed on fish and the water freezes, they're not getting any fish. So they're definitely coming south. The ones who live in Georgia and Florida, no, they're not migrating. They're going to stay in their territory. Why bother? Hi, no, you're welcome. And there's some chairs here if you run short throughout the room. And then there's two here as well. So the southern bald eagles, they are not migratory. In our area, it could go either way. They might migrate, they might not. And sometimes with these birds, it might depend on the gender, where males who defended a territory more likely to stay, females more likely to go. Immatures might be more likely to go than matures. The weather might have something to do with it. So, if it's a warmer winter, fewer birds migrate. So as we go through this area, I just want to we'll talk about migration. I don't want to say that I'm going to give you the sperm answer. This one migrates, this one doesn't. There are even cases where a bird migrates one year and the next year it decides not to. All right, so there are apparently some genetic factors in some studies, and not every bird, but some. So we're going to be talking about migration, but migration is a complicated thing. And it also comes in waves. So let's talk about the waves. One that I actually feel free to grab a chair. You can drag wherever. This is technically something I saw in July, so I'm going to mention it next week. This July, there was a whole bunch of least sandpipers at the 6.5 station, and I was curious because they're usually migrants. They're during migration. I'm like, why are they here in July? And I started reading up. It's like, oh, that's when they start their migration. So when does autumn migration start? July is possible, because if you're a little bird, your eggs are small. So you lay these little eggs. They don't take too long before they hatch. You raise their young. And for some of them, they're like, I'm done. As a parent, I raised my kids. They're alive. See ya. And so they'll start migrating south as early as July. And the least sandpipers were interesting because females migrate first. They lay the eggs and they're like, I did my job. Males, you take care of the young, and they start migrating. The adult males will come a little later, and then the immatures later after that because they have to build up their flight muscles. So autumn migration can start in July. Okay, and I apologize. If you wouldn't mind just muting this, I think someone is. Well, right. I'm getting some feedback, so okay. If that's a problem, just shoot me a text and we'll get. So July actually is when this started, but let's pick up with September. Yes.
Don't fly with their adults.
Ooh, so well, so here's the interesting question. So much of this is species specific. So mute swans, yes, they can stay together as a family unit. Snow geese can stay together as a family unit. But many other birds, no, like a lot of the songbirds and the ducks, they are what are called seasonally monogamous. They form partners like loves of their heart, true relationships for a season. And then September hits and it was really nice knowing you. They separate, and then the following year they'll form another, more bonds for that season. So in that case, a lot of birds come autumn have no ties, not to their young, not to their partners. But then other birds, it's not like that. They'll migrate with a family unit. We'll get to the mute swans, but the mute swans from this year might actually stay through early spring next year. So it comes in waves. And one of the early waves are the bug eaters, all right? A lot of birds eat lots of bugs. Now, there are birds which you can pigeonhole, and no pun intended, and say this one eats this one eats this. But most birds are more omnivorous. Like even bald eagles eat mostly fish, but they can eat lots of things from carrion to ducks. Like, the ducks which are migrating now, if you see eagles at a pond where there's ducks, they might be looking for the fish in the pond. They might be looking for the ducks. And so they're omnivores, and a lot of these, and we'll get to examples here. But there are a lot of birds which eat a lot of insects. And obviously, as it starts getting cold, then um, insects are getting harder to come by. So we'll see them. So if you want to go looking for the migrating warblers, late August and September, that's your time. Now, this is a great time to see migrating warblers because, there's so many species coming through. It's a bad time to see migrating warblers because in spring, the males look like that. Look at the brilliant mask, etc. In autumn, they don't look quite as bright. And hello, yeah, I think we have some chairs. Yes, so we should be good. And so this is an immature which hatched this year. So, and I think it's an immature female. She'll probably look fancier come spring, but a lot of bird watchers don't like fall bird watching as much as they like spring bird watching. In spring, just the males are in their breeding plumage, and they're just easier to pick out. But then all of a sudden, come autumn, we'll start to see warblers which we haven't seen. So here was a northern Parula warbler. That's a neat bird to see. They've got some bluish on them, but they're bluer in spring. So this is from the Heritage Trail, very close to here. This is a very pretty bird, but a little prettier in spring. Black-throated blue warblers coming through. Once again, little prettier in spring, etc. And so we get a lot of bug eaters. Phoebes, kingbirds, they're called flycatchers. So obviously, if you're feeding on flies, late summer, that's when your food supply is going to start to dwindle out. So we'll see a lot of them, but they are migrating south. So here we can see the Phoebes and other flycatchers would be among those. You look up in the sky, and there'll be all of these birds eating bugs. All right, many of these are coming from Canada. You might say, "Wow, these are pretty birds. Those nighthawks. They've got really elongated wings." Now, all of these we've mentioned in the weeks before, so I'm just kind of, putting them together in the theme of, what time of year it is. So you'll see them flying around, nice stripes on their wings. But we didn't see them all summer, and they're just going to be here, in like say August into September as they go south, and they are eating, eating as they go. So insect eaters, they're going to be, actually, why don't I stick with the warblers for a second? They're going to be kind of like the first big wave, August into September. So we say goodbye to a lot of our warblers, and the bird watchers have a soft spot in our heart for the warblers. But you're thinking, wait, he's lying to me, because I was out and I was seeing palm warblers. They didn't look that pretty because that's a spring palm warbler. All right, but I was seeing these. You see the leaves, changing. That's September going into October. I was seeing palm warblers. And then even actually, I just went out 6.5 this weekend, and I did not see a yellow-rumped warbler, but that's the first time. So I've been seeing these guys up until, let's say, a week and a half ago. So you might be thinking, he just said the warblers are gone, come like mid-September, but I was seeing palms, in through October. I was seeing these guys into November. Why? Well, it's because some birds are a little more omnivorous than others. These warblers, better than most, can eat fruit as well. All right, so while a lot of their cousins are primarily eating insects, and once the insects die, they're going south. Here, these are going to hang around for a little while. They're eating poison ivy berries, which is odd. Most birds don't like poison ivy berries, but they can eat them. The palm warblers as well. And so as we get the bug eaters going through, there can be some variation based on, so here and it's doing all the fancy stuff because this is a song. Here it is eating some poison ivy berries as as it goes. All right. So palm warblers would be the same. Yes, you had a question.
What evolutionary traits would a bird need to have in order to digest the poison berries? I mean, poison ivy berries.
So I know specifically, like, so I'd have to know. I think specifically yellow rump warblers make high concentrations of bile salts in their liver, so I think that helps. Cedar waxwings, which I'll be getting to presently, they are one of the few which can digest waxes. So you'd probably just need like a different like enzyme which breaks up big molecules. Like I can eat paper, but I can't get any nutrition out of it because I lack an enzyme like called cellulase, which could break it up. A termite would have it, a goat would have it, but I don't. And so cedar waxwings have an enzyme which can take a big molecule and break it into pieces that other animals wouldn't. So that would be my first guess. And then after that, because what I just said applies to a couple of things, palm warblers, yellow rump warblers, cedar waxwings, there might be different answers to your question for each kind of bird. But those are a couple of examples. Good question. Okay. So there are some I'm sorry, some bug eaters there. Right, we'll get to all the different groups in a second. But I just mentioned cedar waxwings, so let's go to them. So are they migrating through? We saw a couple of these yesterday at the Bashkill. They were, and they posed for us. It was really nice. They stayed in the trees. So will they stay in through November? And the fact that, I just said we saw them, yes. Why? Well, because look at all the berries. This is something called winter berry, which, as you might guess, would remain through winter. Now, a lot of berries don't stay very long, like these, for example. These are silky dogwood. Oh, they are so nutritious. Birds love them. And so they go, the migrating birds, they eat as many of these as they can. And so usually by this point, there are no dogwood berries to be found. They're just, the best food. So, the pickings have already been taken. But then there's what some people might call starvation fruits that, like the buckthorns and the poison ivy, the autumn olive, two of those are invasive species. They're just not nutritious. Like you can eat them. I'm sure you do the same thing. Like there's foods that you would go for first at a buffet, and there's other ones that you would eat if you had to, but not your first choice. Well, a lot of berries in the area would be that. And plus throw in the fact that there are things that most birds would find difficult to digest, with cedar waxwings being an exception. These are really good at eating fruit. One of the few birds that can eat only fruit. So in our area, if you say, in our area, who can survive on fruit and nothing else? Baltimore Orioles, cedar waxwings, and that's about it. Most other things need protein from bugs to a more significant degree. Yes, you had a question, Ben. So cherry trees flower in spring, and I think the fruits follow shortly afterwards. Now, I'm not an expert in much, if anything. And so I'm sure that with landscaping, there can be a lot of exotic things, which aren't native. So I can't speak to that, but I would think that by this point in the year, there really wouldn't be much in the way of cherry fruit. I think that would be primarily an early summer thing.
So, I mean, there's still fruit on mine. Well, I'm not sure if it's technically, I'm pretty sure it's technically a cherry tree, but we don't eat off the cherries. They're very small. It's just for the flowers.
Okay, there is something. Is it an orangey one? There's something. It's an introduced species. It's called something cherry, but it's not a cherry. So my point that I was making earlier is our native cherries, like choke cherries, pin cherries, they flower earlier, and I think that they're done. But because people are free to landscape with whatever plant they want, there are a lot of plants coming in from different parts of the world. I don't want to speak to no cherry is producing fruit, but I believe that most of our native ones have gone. So these you can expect to see in autumn and then remain throughout as much of the winter. They might stay here all winter because they can find food to eat, and often now they're hanging out in groups. Because if there's a fruiting tree, there's a lot of fruit there. So the more eyes you have in your group, that helps you spot, the fruit. So everyone goes to the same place, and then everyone can like keep an eye out for predators. So here or somewhere, maybe it's another video. I have pictures of them on a cedar tree here on campus. So there are some fruit-eating plants birds. They'll stay with us through autumn longer. So even if they're migrating, they can take their time. All right, and you can see them longer. And then there are the waterfowl. Right now, this is exciting because in the past, like the better part of 3 weeks, if you went just up the road, you would have seen hundreds of waterfowl. It's been cold lately, and over the weekend it was like a little under 100, I think. But like 450, and that's a big number of waterfowl. And once again, just 15 minutes away. So this is a great time autumn, not only to see lots of waterfowl, but that species hasn't been here all summer. They nest north of us. All right, so uh, autumn is the time to see green-winged teals. Otherwise, you're going to wait till spring. And I say this a lot. When I was younger, I didn't understand this principle. I would say, I'm going to go bird watching when the weather's nice and warm, and if it's too cold, I won't. And I didn't appreciate it at the time. You're missing your windows. Every species has its window that you can see it here. And so you should go birding in all seasons because you'll keep seeing different things. So hundreds of green-winged teals, but autumn is the time to see them, even going into late autumn. And if you looked for them in the winter, you wouldn't have seen any of them because they breed north of us. So just the fact that, autumn's a great time to go bird watching, hundreds of birds, I've certainly, I'm sorry, I don't know why you cut out. All right, we'll figure it out later. Not only can you see a lot of numbers of birds, I'm impressed because once again, I do my best at birding, but there are individuals who are like, far, far, far better. But just up the road, 15 minutes, in the past month, I've gotten pictures of a dozen different species. That's a lot of ducks, a dozen different kinds in a month at this one spot. And if you were to visit the Delaware, you would have gotten a different kind, like the common mergansers. A month ago, we had blue-winged teal. So, there are far more ducks in the area and then far more here. But for example, here are the black ducks. Oh, and I love black ducks, not only because I do, but their numbers have declined by 84% from, I think it was like 1966 to 2014. We're worried about them. Their numbers are dropping fast. So the fact that, you can see groups of, say, 15 of them in our area, that's kind of nice. You see Canada geese. There was a Canada geese a second ago. They're here somewhere. But this one was so much fun to see. What is this guy doing here? This is a snow goose. Are we expecting them? Yes. We're expecting big groups of them to come in winter. I'll be mentioning them again soon. But we had a lone snow goose hanging out with the mute swans and the Canada geese. This is early for them, and it's weird that they're by themselves. So that was fun.
Is he still there?
He was not there this weekend, but he was there a week and a half ago. And one of the things I struggle with, because we're in a hurry, and so if you look out and you say, I see a bunch of female mallards, like, I want to see bright colors. It's a bunch of female mallards. I'll keep on going. But I think it is good. Just take a moment and just check. Are they all female mallards? Because if you look, you might see, look at that bill. That's not a female mallard. That's a northern shoveler. All right. Hence the name, the shovel that's on the tip of the bill. And they're going to act a little differently, swimming along, filtering the life that they find in the water. There was, when we took a hike, and a lot of you were there, it was wonderful to see you, about a week ago, there was a whole bunch of black ducks. But in amongst the black ducks was this one called a pintail. So once again, if you just take a second and like, I see a bunch of black ducks, I'm just going to look close, check every bird. It's like, here's a new species. It's a pintail, and the male's starting to take on its breeding coloration. So here were the black ducks, and there's the pintail in there. Now, the thing that I have a little trouble with is I'm thinking of winter, like the whole winter is coming, Game of Thrones fans, but these ducks, they're thinking of spring, all right, because they're getting in this is the plumage that males get for flirting. All right, and we're going to see the wood ducks. The wood ducks have been, kind of dull and drab all summer, but that's how they look now. So they're in the mood to start flirting, and they may start pairing up over autumn, some of them, but certainly over winter. And if they pair up over winter, when the females migrate north, the males will follow them. And so, we're thinking of winter, they're already thinking of spring. And, we can see these colors. That's not the colors that they had all throughout the summer. I'll just quickly go through these. Once again, if you check every duck, they're not all in really good range, so you can get really good pictures or video. But here's a widgeon. That was one we saw here. Here's a canvasback, the red head. That's interesting. They like the Hudson River and more brackish area. They're not usually not around here. Here's a gadwall. They're kind of hard to identify, and I don't really see them. So all of these were right up the road. A dozen species in a month. And there's more, because last month we had these guys, the blue-winged teals. Beautiful. You see the blue on their wings. And we're not done yet because we haven't seen them yet. They're coming. All right, but they come a little bit later. These are they're diving ducks, and maybe they don't like the water being shallow. But we expect to see them as winter comes. These are the ringneck ducks. Hooded mergansers are fun too. Like the males have black heads with a big white spot. So migration is not a thing that lasts, like a week or two and then you've missed it. So just, the warblers, most of them came during this time, but then the ones that eat fruit, they came a little later. The ducks, the blue-winged teals, they were here last month. We have a bunch this month. There are still a few more on their way. So, if you get out, there's just an exciting time because you never know what you're going to see. And if it's intimidating, you think there's so many different species, maybe think of, all right, well, it's early autumn and these are what I'm expecting to see. It's late autumn. This is what I'm expecting to see. Now, it's fun to see species. It's also just kind of fun to follow their life history, because if you were around in September, you saw the mute swan doing this. All right, just barely making it over the water, because they can be 30 pounds and have a wingspan of up to 8 feet. And if you just hatched in like end of April, beginning of May, that's a whole lot of growing to get to by September to get flight muscles big enough to support something that's 8 feet long and weighs 30 pounds. But here, by the time we get to October and November, look, lo and behold, there they are flying. And I can tell that's this year's cygnet, because look, its bill is still kind of a brown as opposed to the adults, which are more orange. So that's another fun thing that you can, in addition to say, oh, I saw this bird, I counted how many, but just like, oh, here's the baby mute swan from earlier, all grown up now. It wasn't able to fly. Nice to see. All grown up, ready to fly now. So those have been a couple of different groups of birds. I'd like to do one more for autumn, and then we'll, kind of transition as we're kind of like halfway into winter. Once again, it would be nice to put things into little boxes where you can say, this bird does this. So, here's a vireo, they eat bugs. But once again, yeah, they eat bugs in summer when they can get bugs. And then in autumn, when they can't get bugs, they eat fruit. And lots of birds that are like that. So in winter, you sometimes see birds that doing different things. So you think, oh, robins eat earthworms. In spring, they do. In fall, they're eating berries. They hang out on your lawn in spring, but in winter, they're going to be in the woods more. They're going to be up in trees. So they're hanging out. They're doing things a little different from what you think of them. And then just a quick thing. We live along a major flyway. And by that, I mean, if you want to go from Canada down south, all right, this is a good area to fly through. And so we, more than lots of people, have a chance of looking up and seeing, oh, look, immature bald eagle, here's a hawk, especially if you're near a rocky ridge. And the reason for that is bare rock absorbs heat, so it heats up, but the remaining forest stays cool. And now all of a sudden you've got like difference. You've got warm air, cool air, the warm air rises. So you've got these rising currents of warm air that now raptors with their big wings can use to fly. So if you can find a rocky area to sit out, you'll just see all of these migrating raptors and other birds like ravens, etc. And lots of people don't live in areas along flyways, so that's a neat thing. And I love these birds, but I almost never see them. And when I do, they never stay still long enough for me to get a picture. So like these are just little hawks. They jump around. They live in the bushes. But if they're migrating, you get a good look at, oh, these sharp-shinned hawks. They're neat birds. Just a little bit about them. They eat birds primarily. So while a lot of hawks are eating like rodents, there are hawks that specialize in eating birds, like goshawks, whose name literally means goose hawk, Cooper's hawks, and sharpshins. And these are small. The males are about the size of blue jays. All right. Um, they're I don't see that many of them, but we do live near areas where you can access. So you can go hiking to a rocky ridge, but there's a place not too far from us, Stokes State Forest in New Jersey. There is a rocky, ridge with a bench where you can sit. That's not even 100 yards from where you park. And you can say, oh, there's an immature eagle, there's a broad-winged hawk, there's some turkey vultures, uh, etc. So uh, in our area, you go here and you might see these birds. You go here, you might see those birds, etc. I think I just made the video yesterday. So I don't know where I put it. So if I find it, I'll let you know. But I was kayaking on a deep lake in Pennsylvania, just over the border. And that's different. It's deep water. And I saw a loon. I saw things called scoters. And once again, it's the same general area, but those are birds you're not going to see around here. You go kayaking on the Delaware, you see the common mergansers. You go here, I saw, a couple hundred green-winged teals. So it's not only neat to go out, but neat different places. We do have a very diverse set of habitats in our area. And, you may get in the mood where like, oh, I'm in the mood to look at this type of animal, this today. And so I go here. Yeah. Oh, did you? Oh, good. Oh, that's great. Good for you. I so so I love sharpshins, um, but male raptors are smaller than females, and a female sharpshinned is about the same size of a male Cooper's hawk. And because they don't stay still, you see something and it was one of the two of them and they fly away so fast. So that's wonderful that you saw them. I think I've seen them in the area, but I'm never sure because I'm like, oh, was it the male of this one or the female of this one? And then it flew away. So uh, oh, that's great. That's great. The only time I've ever gotten a good look at a sharpshin really was I was near a nest. It was along a trail, and there are hawks, which it's called stooping. They'll come at you. So some of them will pretend to come at you, but they're not going to come at you because you're big. But goshawks will come at you, and like some people have said, like, "Ooh, I'm going to climb the tree and check out the goshawk nest." You don't do that. They'll defend their nest and come at you. So there was once where it just kept like half diving towards my head and then going away at the last minute. Okay, well that's autumn. All right. Yeah.
I have a kestrel that comes to feed on my dove.
Oh, okay.
Pretty consistent.
Wow. Wow. I'll bet you it's a female. And I say that because kestrels are our smallest falcons. And once again, the males are smaller. Males will, most of their diet is bugs, just because they're little. So, but like a female would feed more on birds. That's neat. And it's still there?
I got pictures of it. What happened was years ago, a flock of crows attacked the kestrel.
Mm-hmm.
And the poor bird landed on my power line in front of my house. So I decided I was in the garage, I'm going to save it.
Mm-hmm.
I start walking toward it, thinking that they're all going to fly away.
Mm-hmm.
And the only one that stayed was the kestrel. All the crows left.
Mm-hmm.
So the day before, a car hit a squirrel.
Mm-hmm.
So I went back in the garage and he was all the shit, all his feathers were hanging out from the attack from the crows.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went and I picked up the squirrel and I brought it over and laid it down probably 10 feet, 15 feet from me. And I just started talking to him. I said, I know you're hungry. You want this dead carrot over here.
And I apologize for those of you at home. I know sometimes you can't hear everything. One of the members of the audience is talking about when they fed a kestrel, which crows had bothered at their house.
And he came down, picked that squirrel up, and the only thing I was worried about when he tried to lift it,
Hmm.
it was a little bit more than he could handle.
Hmm.
So he only got off the ground just about a foot or so.
Mm.
And I was worried he was gonna get hit by a car, but he made it to the other side of the animal deal.
Oh, good, good, good,
So
good,
he comes around pretty regularly.
good, good. Okay, well, yes. Sure, okay. So we're gonna share a picture. Oh, so is that a robin, an immature?
Yes.
Oh,
So
great, that's great.
I feed the birds around my house, and
Uh-huh.
they trust me enough to eat out of my hands.
Oh, that's wonderful. So if anyone wants to see, it's an immature robin, so it doesn't have an orange chest yet. It has more spotting on it. So that's neat. Okay. So transitioning into winter. And like, once again, and forgive me, just they were lessons that it took me far too long to learn. Winter's a good time to go bird watching. Now you're going to see different birds, and you may not see as many birds, but it's still a good time to go bird watching. And one of the things that always stopped me is, but it's so cold. I don't want to go bird watching when it's cold. But then I realized, well, wait a minute, you ski. And when you ski, you just dress for the cold. Like when you ski, you know it's going to be cold, so you just wear layers. You put, the what do you call them? The hot things in your gloves. Yeah, the hand warmers. And you do it when you ski. So if you're going to take a walk in the woods, just wear layers, etc. And you can really see great birds here. Now, here in winter, let me just kind of build the scene. So there's ice on the water. You can kind of see ice, but I took an underwater camera and I just put it on the surface. See all the green algae? All right, so there's life in winter. The algae is still getting sunlight. It's still doing photosynthesis. And then if you were to say, well, are there like water insects and all? The answer is yes. Yeah, so if you were to start scooping up, not as many as you would see in summer. All right, but you still have entire food chains here. So this will support small fish. So we still have aquatic invertebrates. So animals don't have to leave. All right. And so here, for example, here are some neat diving ducks that can now start, diving for any aquatic vegetation that they find. Here, so last winter, there's a place, Croton Point, in I don't think it's New Jersey. I think it's New York still, and not New Jersey. One of those two. Yeah, but in any case, it's New York. One of the wonderful things about it is, I'm not belittling it at all. It's a trash heap, all right, because it was a landfill. But then they just got to the point where like, okay, we're done, we're full, and they covered it over and they just reclaimed it. And now it's this great marshland habitat where you can see, bald eagles, you can see all of this, but you're literally on New York City's garbage that has to be maintained because it's got all this toxic stuff they don't want leaking into the Hudson. But I mean, kudos to them. They took a landfill and made it into great wildlife habitat. So here's the Hudson River. You can see some things here. You can see no entry, for the here, but you can see this is a reclaimed area. So this is a great place to go hiking. And they have in February a big weekend where it's an Eagle Fest. They've got, hikes, they've got presentations, they've got tents for you to hang in. And so you're not going to see as many birds. But we celebrate our winter birds as well. One of the things that I'm going to start leading again, and I'm going to schedule a couple walks for December, is hikes for short-eared owls, because these are winter birds. You will not see them in any other season in Orange County because they're north of us. But just like a lot of birds of ours from summer went to Florida, a lot of Canada birds came here. This is their Florida. And so you go out looking in winter for the birds that you only see in winter. This is their winter, vacation. And if you're lucky on a nice day, these are owls. It's still 3 o'clock. Look how bright the sun is. And they're just going out and playing. Just beautiful, beautiful birds. About 20 minutes from here, the the Wallkill River National Wildlife Refuge. There's two trails, the Liberty Loop and the Winding Water Trails. The Liberty Loop is a little better to see these guys. Any more it's famous, and anymore, like I'm really kind of nervous when I want to organize a hike there, just because the parking just goes, they don't have parking for 30 people at all. And these are famous. Lots of people know this is where you go to see the short-eared owl. So it's just so you know, if you wanted to go, time it, maybe weekends, aren't your best um, time. But once again, if you dress warm, short-eared owls, that's a winter birding event. And on certain times, they'll come out just at dusk, but on certain days, you'll see them coming out in the sunlight still. And that's great. And if you ask why, it's because like the rodents are still out. Like even though it's winter, like things haven't died and rodents are warm-blooded. So you got all this marsh vegetation. There are voles everywhere. And so then the birds that eat the voles, they say, well, they can stay here. So we have harrier hawks coming out during the day, and at dusk they go away, and the short-eared owls come out, and then just continue doing what they were doing, just eating the voles. A couple other ones, just there's different kinds of wrens. A lot of them will go south in winter. Carolina wrens might. Like this is kind of about as cold as they can stand. And if it's a warm winter, maybe they'll stay with us. If it's cold winter, maybe they go farther south and maybe even die. But then this is called a winter wren. You're only going to see them in winter because in other seasons they're north of us. So once again, if you're looking at a bird book, you say, oh, there's so many different kinds of birds. But maybe get a checklist. Oh, but these are the ones I expect to see in the season. Oh, I'm going to keep a lookout for winter wrens, all right, because they're ones that I'm not as likely to see. Red-breasted nuthatches, I'm more likely to see them in winter than I am in other seasons. Slate-colored juncos or dark-eyed juncos. I think now the official name is dark-eyed. They were going back and forth on the naming. These are sparrows. But while we could see them all year round, we rarely do. They're winter birds primarily. And so I'm going to go look for the juncos. I'll just go through these in order. These don't come here every year. All right, the snow geese. Now I showed you we had one here. And they are just treats when they are, because just look at them. They can be in flocks of hundreds or thousands. And when they all just shift, direction, all of a sudden you see all of a sudden you'll see their black wingtips, etc. And once again, the Liberty Loop at the the Wallkill River, I think that's the best place to see them. But there are other places that are really reliable. If you ever drive towards Philly and you're going towards Allentown and you're getting onto 22 from Route 33, you'll pass snow geese in the cornfields along your side. But just it's hard to see them here, but if you just look up from the Liberty Loop, there are just thousands of them here. This is going on the road to Allentown. Once again, this is a winter thing. All right, they're not only in Canada, they're in the far north of Canada, like about as far north as you can go. That's where they breed. But this is Florida to them, all right, because obviously it's too cold there. So they're going to come in our area, eat a lot of the refuse corn, etc. If they can. So once again, winter, I go out prepared. I'm not going to see quite the diversity of birds that I would, but there are neat birds that this is my chance to see. Golden crowned kinglets, we saw them on the hike yesterday. They're beautiful little birds. They're smaller than sparrows, and not many birds can say that. So if you see a bird smaller than a sparrow, you say, already, I only have a couple of things that it could be. And while we could see them throughout the year, we're really not going to. But winter, we will. All right, so they're common in winter. And so, just keep a lookout for these little birds. You might see a nice little patch of yellow on their head. Their cousins, the ruby crowned kinglets, can be here as well. Now, in one sense, I am not the biggest fan of starlings. They're an invasive species. They're not native here. They've taken the place of other birds. So there's that. But in winter especially, they can be pretty. They do have kind of iridescent colors. But in winter, they come in groups, and the group has a name. It's called a murmuration. Some birds, their groups have names, like it's called a murder of crows. And I apologize, there's a board member on the Audubon Society. She has a shirt that I love. Now that you can get it, now that you're bird geeks like us. So it's called a murder of crows. And so she has a shirt that has 2 crows on it, and then it says attempted murder. So anyway, I think that's hilarious. But you can see thousands of them. And in winter, you may not see many birds, period. But all of a sudden you look up, it's like, wait, no, I saw thousands. So, that's certainly something. And the way that they can all coordinate and change direction together, that is a joy to watch. Yes. Yes, right. I totally agree. And so if it weren't for the starlings and the house sparrow and the cowbird, like all the diversity of birds that we would have here, without the ones which don't belong here, we'd have so many more warblers and bluebirds, etc. I totally agree with you. Hmm. Oh, wow. Oh, that's interesting. Well, so once again, being a biologist, I'd hate to like root for one species. You're a good species, you're a red. But kind of what you just said, like just it is, even if it's not my favorite species, just the sheer number of them and the way they coordinate, that's a joy to watch. Or even that, just that kind of sequence where, they did this and the crows did this, and there's a lot of biology out there to watch, a lot of nice stories. Here's a sparrow. And once again, I can totally get if sparrows aren't your thing. But 2 things. One, there's a bunch of sparrows that we're going to see in winter, but not other times of the year, like tree sparrows. All right. Once again, this is their Florida. And so they have a unstreaked chest, which that's the first thing you look for in most sparrows, because you're like, streaks on the chest, you're probably a song sparrow or maybe one of these other ones like a fox sparrow or a savannah. But you see an unstreaked chest and you're like, oh, you're in the other group. And in winter, you don't see streaks on the chest and you're thinking, oh, I think you're a tree sparrow. That's cool because I haven't seen you since last winter. So once again, you'll see some birds that you usually don't see. Here are sparrows, which we usually don't see until winter, white crowned sparrows. I saw one yesterday, but it flew away real quick. I saw the female, which is a little harder to identify, but the males show you why they're called the white crowned sparrows. They've got that nice white stripe on the top of their head. So that's a winter bird. You see the green around that. I took these in Chicago, so I was up farther north where I got the ones pictured green. But we'll see them all winter, so that's Orange County. And here you can see a nice white crowned sparrow there. And for those of you who know me, I always play my song. So here's a song. Okay, so the song is essentially, I'm on this winter walk and I'm not seeing anything. So like it's kind of drab and wintry. But then I look closely and I see 4 different species of sparrow. If I'd thrown in the juncos, I would have seen 5. So if you're a bird watcher, and if you're bored, if you're not seeing all that much diversity, why not practice your sparrows? And you're like, oh, look at that. There's a tree sparrow. Oh, there's a white crowned sparrow. There's a white-throated sparrow. There's a song sparrow. There's a junco. So just a crazy thought on that. We'll see woodpeckers all winter long, because there are still bugs here. They're just harder to find. You have to be able to slam your skull into hard surfaces so hard that you make a hole and have a really long tongue that can reach out and grab everything. But if you've got that, then you can find the bugs where they live. So as a lot of birds migrate south, a lot of the woodpeckers are not among them, all right, because they can still feed on still feed on the bugs. So we'll be likely to see many of those. But there are exceptions to everything, including what I just said. And by that I mean somewhere. Oh, there you go. There are different kinds of woodpeckers. Flickers are woodpeckers that primarily eat ants. They eat more ants than any other North American bird. So while lots of flickers, so there's a flicker and a downy next to it. So while flickers can stay in our area, most of them will leave just because they'll find more ants farther south. And in the same way, here is another woodpecker, the yellow-bellied sapsucker, all right? And they like to feed on flowing sap. And in winter, there's no flowing sap. It'll start flowing again in spring. So once again, I hate to make these blanket statements like, oh, woodpeckers will remain here in the winter. Because, you know, if you think you're like, oh, but there will be exceptions. The flickers will mostly go. The yellow-bellied sapsuckers will definitely go. But a lot of the woodpeckers will stay. Plus, the climate is changing. Mockingbirds, they were really uncommon here in the winter, but not anymore. More and more, you can pretty much depend that you can still see mockingbirds. 20 years ago, it wasn't the case. So, you know, we're also seeing that. All right, it was, you know, 70 degrees not that long ago. According to NOAA, October was the second warmest October in that they've been recording. Last year was the hottest. This November seems to be following a suit, where it might be second only to last year. So, you know, what birds we might see, you know, completely changing. It's so dry. So where you're going to see birds, you know, that might be one of the reasons we saw 400 waterfowl. I love the 6.5 station sanctuary, but it's you know, it's not the highest quality wetland, you know, that I've ever seen. And the fact that you're seeing 450 birds there, maybe just all the other places the birds would go are just too dry. All right, so, you know, who knows what we'll get to see. Winter is also the time to see this hawk, which only lives in our area in winter, called the rough-legged hawk. Once again, the Liberty Loop is a great place for that. So I go to the Liberty Loop. I know I'm not going to see the diversity of the songbirds that I used to, but I'm looking like I might see snow geese, all right? I might see rough-legged hawks. I might see, you know, tree sparrows, you know, and I won't see them again until next winter. So maybe when you go out bird walking in winter, you know, you get a little list. And once again, now you're not thinking, oh, there's all of these hawks. Yeah, there are, but in winter, especially in Liberty Loop, you're going to see red tails, you're going to see rough-leggeds, and you're going to see the harrier hawks. Those are the main ones that you're going to see. And so now when you see a hawk, you're like, okay, well, I'm really expecting to see 3 primarily. And so that makes your life a little easier if you're just beginning bird watching. Yes. Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Oh, that's great. That's great. And then one other thing, so birds can look different in winter because a lot of them will get their breeding plumage later, but they also might act different. Like, so these are robins, but you think, wait, robins high in the trees eating berries? I think of them, you know, once again on my lawn eating worms. Yeah, but it's winter, so they might be eating different things. They might be hanging out in like the starling groups, the thousands of them. They don't do that in summer. So the way that they flock together, that's a winter behavior. You know, the fact that the robins are in bigger groups in trees, that is you know, that's something for winter. Before I get to like the kind of final point, obviously there's more wildlife in winter. So I'll just point these out just in passing, but also remember these are predators. All right, and so not only are they just, oh, here's some wildlife you might be interested in, but also if we're talking about birds, this is who they have to look out for. So the raccoons are still coming out, even on frozen ice. So, you know, if they can find birds near the shoreline, they can. This, I haven't seen it this year. This year, we had an otter at 6.5 stay for a while, and I found a dead mink. Last year, on the trail cam, we got video of live mink. This is a fisher. So a fisher is in the mink and otter family, only it's bigger. They were gone from our area for a long time, but they're back. And so once again, these aren't birds, but last time we talked about food chains, they can eat birds. And so just whoever stays here in the winter, you know, they're parts of food chain. So they have to avoid these. And, you know, obviously our winters have been so warm that who we keep, it can vary, like great blue herons. Will they remain here in winter? They could if there's open water. All right. Bald eagles will stay in our area if there's open water. And if all of the water freezes, I'm just going to play this in the background. If all of the water freezes in the area and you say like, oh, I can't see bald eagles. Actually, it's a great time to look for bald eagles if you know where to go. because there's only like two places that, like, okay, the Hudson. But in this area, unless you go to the Hudson, there's really only two places they can go. They can go to the Lackawaxen, where that joins the Delaware. Here's a bobcat in winter at the Bashakill. So once again, I just mentioned that they climb trees. So once again, any birds which stay in our area, they have to be wary of this. Or Forestburg and the Rio Dam there. And so if you know where to go, when it's bitter cold, there is still running water, but only a couple of places. And then when you go, you say, there's an eagle, there's an eagle, there's an eagle, and so cold days can be great places to see eagles as long as you know the few places where the water is still unfrozen. And then, yeah. And so if we were to consider like what we see during fall, what we see during autumn, during winter, well, then there comes the time where this is 6.5 station, once again, right up the road. And what you're seeing here are the snow geese. Look at them all beautiful, and you're thinking, I've never seen them there at like this, because they had been at Liberty Loop. And the answer is, right, we're north of Liberty Loop. So there was a specific day where the ones down there on the Jersey border decided, okay, it's time to go back to Canada. And they flew, whatever, like 20 miles or whatever. And they decided, oh, here's another wetland. Why don't we stop here? We'll like munch up a little bit. And then a couple hours later, we'll continue our journey. So here, winter's ending. All right. And they know it's time to go back to our summer home. And so here, our winter birds, but this is the last time that we saw them in the spring, because they took off from here. They only stayed a couple of hours. I got pictures of them at night. The trail cam caught them, and here's in the morning. And then there they go. And apart from the lone one, which was all by itself for no reason, they'll come back this winter. We're hoping they usually do. But once again, they're a winter bird here. And in the background, you see a duck that I like a great deal called the ringneck duck. So the brown one is the female, the black ones, those are the males. They haven't come through yet, so they migrate, but later than most ducks. So, we can see those on lakes near us soon, but it's a little early. So in November going into December, we'll see those. But then they will be among the early ones back. So February is still winter, like winter officially ends March 21st. But February, you can see pintails, even when there's still snow and ice. You can see ringnecks, like as long as there's still there's some open water, even if there's some ice. So when do we start seeing the spring migration? Late February is possible, certainly by early March, especially as it gets warmer. So it's kind of, that's one of the neat things to get in tune with the world around us. Like, even though winter is coming, the ducks they're getting in their spring finery, for courtship season. So they're already thinking of spring. And then at the end of February, you look around and you're starting to see signs of spring, that there are bird, that are starting to migrate etc. So, and I've said this before, and I feel a little guilty saying it. Like, I've been to the Caribbean. Caribbean's beautiful. I've been out west. I love out west. But I think it gets boring to me, in that there's just the kinds of trees, the kinds of birds, you run out very quickly. Like, it's just less diversity. This is really an incredible area for all that you can see. Like, just if there were like a dozen species of duck just there. And if you were to go to, there's the grasslands, the Shawangunk grasslands, the ridges here, the Delaware, the Hudson, all of these, are different habitats where you would find different birds. So we're really fortunate to live in an area with such diversity, but also such diversity year round. And so, I hope that you get to enjoy, going out in autumn, in winter. Once again, one of my favorite lessons is, birding in winter is great. Just got to dress warmer. Like, and these things. I would dress warm going skiing, and then I'd go out birding in some skimpy thing and be like, oh, I hate it. It's so cold. So I hope that you have a wonderful birding season. If you were interested in birding groups, the Bashakill and the Audubon, they'll post upcoming walks. It's been great to see a number of you out on the walks that we've done, and I look forward to seeing you, some of you, on our future walks. So yes, I'll answer a few questions, but I apologize. I usually try to leave at a certain time, and today it's really important. So I have this like this, not that anyone cares. I have this martial arts class, and it's like tonight's a belt test, and that's like being late to them. That's